Hello again. This is GPS, God's Prophetic Surprises. I'm Jon Paulien. I'm Professor of Religion at Loma University. And next to me is Philip.
Hi, good morning. My name is Philip Milosavljevic. I'm the young adult pastor at the Loma University Church.
And I am Viana Chambers, and I work with the children at the Calamasa Church, and I'm a seminary student at La Sierra University.
And I'm Guilherme Borda, and I am a PhD student at Andrews University.
All right. Well, we are moving from verse 18 to 19 in Revelation 11. Viana, would you read those two verses for us just to remind us of where we've been and where we're going?
Yes. Verse 18. The nations were angry, and your wrath has come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that you should reward your servants, the prophets and the saints, and those who fear your name, small and great, and should destroy those who destroy the earth. Then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his temple. And there were lightnings, noises, thunderings, an earthquake, and great hail.
Yeah, hearing the nations were angry reminds me, you were saying before the program, the time you were angry.
Yeah, when
people looking at you would think maybe you never get angry, but I want to hear this.
When you're talking about showing mercy and those who had received mercy, and I was reminded of a time where we had this final project, and you described it perfectly in the last episode, and I actually did it. And there were some classmates who didn't, and the teacher ended up saying, well, due to timing and due to these constraints, we don't need to turn in a final project. And of course I was mad, because I said I spent so much time, and it almost felt like my time and efforts had been invalidated, like they had been for nothing. And so yes, that initial wrath came up and say, well, I deserve at least extra credit, or I deserve, or they deserve, whatever. And then I was just reminded of, the benefits that come with having had prepared the project and the extra knowledge and the experience that I got with it. So that calmed me down just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, but this reminds me, though, it's one reason Jesus was crucified was not that he was judging people. It was the opposite. It was his kindness that infuriated them. They wanted him to slap down the Romans. They wanted him to talk about a God who will give everybody what they deserve at the end. And when he didn't paint that kind of picture of God, they thought he had a devil. So, yeah, interesting stuff. All right. I think you had a comment, didn't you, Guilherme, that didn't get in last time, about destroying those who destroy the earth.
Yes.
I was interested in that.
So here in this text, those who destroy the earth are in juxtaposition with the servants of God, the prophets, the saints, and those who fear his name. So it's clearly you have those who are with God, and the other are God's enemies, right? I think that sometimes, especially in this day and age, we may think, destroy the earth. So it may sound like the key point here is an ecological point. And I think it fits better the context to be something more related to faithfulness to God versus unfaithfulness to God and iniquity. Of course, that iniquity leads to the destruction of the environment. But I would say it's much more than that, right? Because, of course, those who fear God, knowing he's the creator, want to care for the environment because it was created by God. But it's much more than that. And then there's parallels with the narrative of the flood in Genesis 6. And so that's just one point that I think is important to keep in mind, that who are these who destroy the earth? These are people who are enemies of God, people who are practicing iniquity and are filling the earth with iniquity and doing...
From a biblical perspective, what does cause environmental disaster?
Well, I think there's a number of causes that we could point. Because the beginning was the original cause for any environmental problem was the fall, right? Before sin, the environment was perfect, and there was perfect harmony between the creatures and the environment they're in. But after sin, I think one word that characterizes world post-sin is this harmony, right? Whereas before there was chaos, and then God arranged earth so now it's pure harmony. Now there's decay leading to chaos again, right? So sin and selfishness and greed and that conflict, it leads to all of these things.
At its root, wouldn't the cause of environmental destruction be selfishness?
Absolutely.
I want my piece of the action.
Yeah. It reminds me of the film Noah. You guys have maybe seen it, I don't know, but it definitely paints a political side of the story, but that the cause of the demise of the earth was this, as Guillermo was talking about, this imbalance of the system. Yeah. All the trees, all the minerals, everything was mined out, and there was nothing left, and it was desolation. And when you look at this verse, those destroying the earth, I think there is a part that this side, this political spectrum, proves to be true and right. Hey, we do have to care for the earth. In the beginning, Genesis 1, 2, 3, there's this vision cast by God. Hey, you've been given dominion over the earth. And now, unfortunately, man, after sin, you're going to have to really work hard at it. Work hard at keeping harmony, working, toiling, laboring in there. So I think as believers, we do need to look at that and say, hey, there is a part I play. I do need to care for the earth. I don't know if that's necessarily pointing at what this is saying, but I think that jumped out at me as I read that.
Well, politics is pretty good at the diagnosis of what's wrong with the world. It's not so successful at the solution. Because if the solution is not a political one, then politics can't lead to a solution.
And you know what's interesting that Philip mentioned this politics, and we should not forget that here politics is in this. It's interesting because this is liturgy with political overtones, because they're talking about the nations versus this powerful ruling God.
Yeah, you're
so
right.
It's a conflict of power. It is, in a sense, human politics, getting things messed up versus God coming to bring harmony again, right? So you have human nations that trespass the creaturely boundaries and create a mess, including with the environment, but just iniquity in general, versus God coming. And so I think, a lot of times people may be a little bit, let's not talk about politics in the church. Well, but we're not talking about any partisan politics here. All we're talking about is that the great controversy between Christ and Satan manifests itself in the political arena, in economics, in social issues, in every sphere possible. That conflict is present, right? And so God trying to bring harmony, and then human rulers that trespass that creaturely boundary, bringing chaos.
So the fall has political consequences.
It does.
And the gospel is not political. It's addressing something else, but it has political consequences because it undermines the selfishness that is at the core of why, we want this and we want that, and we can't both have it at the same time. That's what politics is all about.
Yeah.
How do you manage conflicting expectations? How do you manage selfishness?
Yeah.
You see, the gospel kind of undercuts all sides in the political spectrum, so that both the Jews and the Romans were mad at Jesus because he was undercutting both of them. Without being political, the message that he was giving had political implications.
I have real reservations when we try and throw in Jesus being on one side or the other, right? Was he partisan to this side, or I think he would definitely be more of a Democrat. Well, no, he's for sure more of a Republican. Are you crazy?
No, he's an independent.
Oh, he's an independent. Oh, I like that. There we go. I think there needs to be some sense of understanding. Hey, he is geopolitical. He's for the whole world in his way, in his time, in his understanding. But I
Yeah.
love that comment, Guillermo, this overtone of the political in Revelation. We sometimes want to push that out, but it's so true.
Because you see, it judges creaturely efforts to act as God. So whatever creaturely effort that usurps that belongs only to God, such as we'll see later, dictating worship and creating objects of worship, right? Wait, God is the only worthy object of worship. Or, like controlling people. We see all kinds of things here, language that critiques all these moral failures that are seen in society. We have the language of slavery in the book. We have the language of these kings and the merchants. So all of these different aspects. The point is that it's not trying to say, the idea, I think at least, we should not try to say, is it defending the Romans or the Jews or this side or the other? I think at the end of the day, it's human systems that trespass creaturely boundaries versus the Creator that is the only worthy ruler. Even in Israel, who was really supposed to be the king of the nation? It was God, right? But then the people are like, we want a king to go after us like the other nations. You see, sometimes we don't get it. We want to be like the nations. But God has called us to be a different nation, right? And to let Him be the king, because when He's the king, then things fall into place, then there is harmony and there is restoration and reconciliation. So you have that.
Do you think God is anti-national? Would that be appropriate, or is that too far to say then?
I think God is for the kingdom of heaven. See, God is for the kingdom of heaven. He's for the establishment of the kingdom of heaven. Christians are not here to establish a Christian nation. They're here to spread the kingdom of heaven. And so that's what I would say.
But when the gospel is rightly spoken, it is threatening to the political elites.
That is true.
You see? And just as an example, fixing the environment is a good thing. But whenever sinful human beings fix something, they tend to break other things in the process of fixing them. And for example, I put solar panels on my roof. That seems like a very good thing to fix the environment. Then I found out that there's all kinds of toxic chemicals and metals necessary in order to create them, and that's causing environmental damage where they're built, etc. Unless we let God fix the universe, our efforts will tend to do often as much harm as good. So that's so the gospel tends to temper our confidence that political solutions will really fix it, and usually they don't. So.
When the word "my people" is used, is that political of a statement? Is that saying, hey, there is a nation I have chosen. They are above the rest. I mean, maybe that's taking us in a totally different direction.
Well, if you look at the larger picture there, that was a nation that was set aside not because they were better. In fact, he says, you were, in many ways, you were the worst. But I chose you because you were willing to listen, and then I wanted you to bless the nations. So God chose some to reach out to the rest. When they didn't do that, then God had to find other ways of reaching out to the rest. And that included, of course, Jesus with his radical agenda to spread Israel beyond just the Jewish nation. So, well, let's get to verse 19, because there's a lot of interesting stuff here. It says there, the temple of God, which is in heaven, was opened, and the Ark of the Covenant was seen in that temple, and lightnings and thunders and noises and earthquakes and great hail appear. So these terms appear repeatedly in Revelation, these sets of terms, and usually it's a very dramatic moment when it happens. But I think the first question is, does verse 19 belong to the seventh trumpet, or does it belong to chapter 12? And you might say, well, it's obviously in chapter 11, so it belongs to the seventh trumpet. And I would remind you that the chapter divisions didn't occur for many centuries after the New Testament was written. And that means that the chapter divisions are not inspired. So, should verse 19 belong to the seventh trumpet, or does it introduce chapter 12 and what goes beyond? I would argue that at the beginning of every vision in Revelation, there is a sanctuary introduction. My mentor, Kenneth Strand, was the first to use that kind of a language. You go to the seven churches, what comes before? The vision of the candlesticks.
Yes.
You have the seven seals, what comes before? The heavenly throne room with about 15 different sanctuary allusions in there.
Whoa.
The trumpets, what comes before? The vision of the golden altar with the incense rising. So you have a sanctuary introduction for every section. There's no sanctuary introduction in chapters 12, 13, and 14. If 11:19 is not the introduction to what follows, then there is none. But you'll see if you go through all the way through Revelation, there's always a sanctuary scene first, and then a visionary action, usually on earth. So 11:19 would then be the introduction to chapters 12 through 14.
That makes sense.
And what is the content here? The word temple is naos, which is normally the word for the most holy place. The naos, the most holy place, was seen in heaven, and in it is what?
The Ark of the
Covenant.
Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant, which is in the most holy place of the earthly temple. So you have here, the temple is seen, the Ark of the Covenant is seen, and excitement, noise and everything else, flashes of light occurs. One more observation to clinch the deal. All right, the word seen, the Ark of the Covenant was seen, is a special Greek word, ophtheh. It appears only 3 times in Revelation.
Oh.
Once in 11:19, once in 12:1, and once in 12:3. Linking
They're
chapter
together.
12 with 11:19.
Yeah. Great proof.
Yeah.
All right, you
So-
convinced me.
Good. All
I'm
right.
convinced.
That makes 2 of us.
Now, the idea in verse 19, the very first part, the temple in heaven, the most holy place being opened, wow, that's significant.
Yeah.
It's an unveiling of the most precious space of God's presence. I alluded to almost this idea of the commitment one takes in a dating relationship. Till you finally get to that wedding night, if you've made that final commitment, there's a consummation, everything's laid bare. And here, God, He lays bare this precious space that was only allowed to be seen once in the year on the Day of Atonement, right? And now He's showing it to the world. Whoa. That's significant.
So God is open to scrutiny. Why isn't He more open today? Why is God so silent today if the Bible portrays Him as open to scrutiny? Well, that's, yeah.
The first thing that comes to my mind is the end of verse 18, those who destroy the earth. And I don't know if that vulnerability, that openness to those who destroy the earth could have horrific consequences right now if He did that.
Wow.
I don't know.
So you're saying that God hides Himself for our sake, because the very presence of God would be experienced as destruction.
I think there's also the idea that I think that here, because it goes back to that covenant, right? Because it's the Ark of the Covenant. I think it shows us that I think that apocalyptic literature arises from the soil of covenant. It's in the context of covenant that it occurs. Now, the God of the covenant, who is working through in human history he may not seem to be as visible today. But I think a number of points we could say is that, one, he has his servants who are his representatives, whom he has sent all over the world to represent him, to manifest his goodness and his character to people by interacting with them, in fulfilling the Great Commission.
Are you saying God is not silent? He's asking us to speak for him?
Yes, I think he's not silent. I think he's not only asking us to speak for him, but he's speaking through us. Right?
I like that.
Not only with our words, but he's speaking through our actions.
Yeah.
Because our actions that spring out of a renewed heart are in itself the result of a miracle, right? And so, as he sends his representatives, those who bear the name of Christ, he is revealing himself to the world through them. But once in a while, he also appears in miraculous ways, in the sense of the miraculous that we generally associate with, in supernatural ways, right? Now, that seems to happen, it doesn't happen as often as we would like, right? We would like to just see miracles everywhere. For some reason, we don't see it in the way that we expect. But God, he doesn't always work in the way that we expect, or most of the times, right? But I think he is revealing himself sometimes through these very clearly miraculous ways, but maybe mostly in the flesh. Before, it was in the flesh of Jesus, but now in the flesh of his servants. We are his, in a sense, right? Some people like to say that we are Christ's body now, right? On earth, in a sense, right? Because the church is this embodiment of what Christ does.
Well, when God does miracles, people follow because they're of the power of God, the awesome power. But the issue in the controversy is not power. Satan knows that God is more powerful. Even in his human form, the demon-possessed man bows down to Jesus. The demons are acknowledging a superior.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
So the issue is not over power. The issue is over how that power gets used. The issue is over character. And miracles tend to obscure that the core issue of the conflict is not power, but is character. So it directs us in the wrong direction.
I think when we look at the verse itself, I think character comes out beautifully, because it says, the most holy place is opened, the Ark of the Covenant is seen in the temple. What is the significance of that? To me, that points to what was in the Ark of the Covenant, where God's character is manifest.
Okay, and what was in the ark?
I mean, you had the manna in the bowl, right? You had the rod of Aaron, but then you had the Ten Commandments themselves. So when we look at this, God is saying, hey, I'm showing you my character. I'm showing you my way of rule and my way of life, and this balance I desire for the world and for all of you. Trust that. I have run this race this way.
So is it possible in the final stage of Earth's history that the character of God is the crucial thing that needs to be shared and revealed? Is that the crucial thing about Revelation? Yeah.
I think there is something so valuable in like 100% transparency, and that can be so damaging, right, to the person being 100% transparent, but also to the people facing this transparency, where the truth is before them. There is no hiding. There is no, doubt of who God is. And I think that needs to be shown at some point, so that we're not continuously guessing or trying, like Guilherme said, exerting our power over this, continuing to exert our power over the earth, because God is completely laid bare, in a sense, for all of us.
No, Diana, one thing I would say, like, kind of, I don't want to say disagreeing, but like...
no, please disagree.
Like, because it said 100% transparency, right? But some people would say, well, God is not 100% transparent. Like, think about the Job narrative. At the end of the day, God didn't even explain to Job what was going on. And this is, if someone came to me and asked me about this, this is what I would say. I would say that God has revealed enough, and there are things he could have revealed beyond that I would question, would I even manage to handle that? And second, we will never know everything. Even when we are in the face of God, we will never fully comprehend him. So I think there's always room for faith, right? I think faith and trust. So, for example, I don't know everything about my wife, right? I don't know every single detail. There's no way. But I trust her. So I think trust is the key element in relationship that makes so the unknown will not make the relationship unviable. It creates the viability for a relationship, especially in the context where I am unable to handle everything. I don't know. But but God, he at the cross, he revealed something that should put to rest every question that would make the relationship impossible to happen, which is, whatever is there that I don't understand, I know that the God that is handling the universe and that is looking out for my welfare, that wants my well-being, is the God that is willing to put his life on the line, to sacrifice. And so I think because this is about character, because the cross is the greatest manifestation of God's character, and as he calls his servants to also be self-sacrificial that way, this should show to people, we don't know everything, but we know one thing. The God who is over the universe is a God who truly loves us. He's willing to put his life on the line for us.
That's good.
Well, let me point out that if 11:19 is the stage backdrop, if you will, for chapters 12 through 14, character is at the center. First of all, you have the commandments in 12:17. You have the commandments again in 14:12. In Revelation 15, it talks about the tabernacle of the testimony, which is a parallel to this verse. Sandwiching chapters 12 to 14. That is a quotation of Exodus 34, which is talking about the Ten Commandments. So the Ten Commandments are crucial in all of this. But what is the central issue in chapters 13 and 14? It's worship. 7 times there's a call to worship the beast and his image and so on. 1 time there's a call to worship God. And what is worship all about? It's a focus on God, a focus on God's character. Character of God is the center issue of the cosmic conflict, and it's the central issue of the last days of Earth's history. Is God worthy of our worship? Is God truly who he claims to be? And that is the issue that needs to be settled in the final crisis of Earth's history. Well, our time is up. Again, on GPS, delighted to have you with us this time, and we will move into chapter 12 in the next program, and we hope that you can be with us then as well. God bless you. Till next time.